Next up, I'd like to introduce our first keynote conversation, Ms. Portia Sabin, who many of you know. She is the president of the Music Business Association. And Portia, before we get started, I just want to say thank you, because I think out of many of these organizations, you've definitely been the one who immediately pivoted to online sessions with all the weekly web events and bringing on great speakers. It hasn't been helpful just for us academics, we also have a lot of students tuning in regularly. So thanks for doing that. The conversation will be moderated by Joel Steinhardt from Drexel University. Joe, take it away.
Thanks, Armin.
Thanks.
Hi, how's it going, everybody? Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Well, welcome. I'm very excited I got asked to do this, of course. I've sort of known you for a little while in different professional contexts, but I'm excited to really kind of dig a little bit deeper into who you are. So I hope you're ready.
Scared.
No, it won't be scary. So I guess we should start with actually quite literally who you are. You're currently president of Music Biz, but let's sort of go back and start at the beginning. Your first real foray into music, it seems like, was back when you were in high school and you picked up bass. Is that correct? Was that your first foray into any level of music industry and whatnot?
Yeah. I wanted to be a bass player like John Taylor of Duran Duran. I thought that would make a nice opening line for when I met him, and we had a conversation about life.
So that's why bass, though.
That's why bass. I picked up bass.
And then at some point you switched to drums. I guess what made that switch?
It's funny. Bass, I didn't really play in high school because I didn't really have people to play with. It was kind of an 80s thing that I hope girls don't have as much trouble with now as we did then. But the boys had already been playing in their bedrooms for such a long time that they were really good. So I was really intimidated. I didn't want to ask them if I could play with them. So I didn't play in a band in high school, but I started playing in bands the minute I got into college. And drums was a weird one because it was just, I saw a friend who was playing drums and I was like, what the hell? How do you know how to play drums? And she's like, oh, they have a drum room here on campus. You can pay $100 and you can take, all these lessons and use the drum room anytime. And I ran out, threw down my $100, took one, and the next day got into a Pixies cover band as the drummer, which now is I can't even believe that and I was in the band with 4 dudes and they were the nicest dudes ever because they were willing to play with somebody who had literally had one drum lesson. So you can imagine how fabulous I was on drums. But for me, it was the minute I started playing, it was, oh, where have you been all my life? This is the instrument for me.
And this was in college, still back at Grinnell, right?
Yeah, in Iowa, good old Iowa.
You finished in 1993, right? And then you went to New York, or you went somewhere, but you went to Minneapolis in between.
Yeah, my band called the Shepherd Kings, we moved to Minneapolis to make it in the music biz, and we did not. We broke up. They got a new drummer. I played in a few other bands and then eventually gave up on Minneapolis and went home to New York City, where I did get into a band 5 minutes within 5 minutes of getting home. I found a new band in the back of the Village Voice classified ads, which is how people found each other in those days, pre-internet. And I started playing in a band that happened to be an all-girl band. I'd never been in an all-girl band before. And that band I played in for 4 years, and we played around New York and sort of, did the getting to know you thing in New York, where we, became friends with all the other bands that played in New York and did our thing. But we never toured. And we didn't even really record. We recorded a couple of things in a friend's basement, but it wasn't serious. And then the band I got in after that was my serious band. It was called the Hissyfits, and we did a lot of touring and recording. We put out 2 records. And that was my little indie, on a tiny indie label from Detroit experience that made me feel like I had enough knowledge to be dangerous. So when I got out of that band, I started a management company company, and I started managing some friends' bands. And that was really the beginning of my actual music industry career.
And this was Shot Clock we're talking about, right? And this was what year?
Shot Clock Management.
Maybe?
I think 2001 was when we started. Yeah, I started it in 2001. And then in 2004, I made it into like a real LLC. And my husband came on as another manager. We actually had two other partners. It started out with like 4 people. Those 2 people quickly left as these things happen. And my husband then asked me to take over his record label, Kill Rock Stars, in 2006, about 2 years in. So we did like a funny swap where I took over the record label and he became primarily a manager. So Shot Clock had a client list of like 12 clients around 2006, 2007. But I had moved at that point to just managing this band, The Gossip, and running the record label. So 2006, 2007, 2008, those were some very crazy years for me. I was real busy.
There were years you were doing both.
I was doing the label and managing. And I also had a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Washington because I have a PhD like you. And so that was really, really crazy. But I did quit my postdoc to do music full time. I decided to jump into music with both feet in about 2006.
Haven't done that yet. I'm still trying to live both lives. But
I know you're straddling the line continually.
I'm still straddling. It's not the same industry it was back then. So I don't know if I can. Yeah. Who knows? But so wait, I want to step back a second, but first I want to go to the middle, I guess. So there were some years you were actually managing and running Kill Rock Stars and PhD and I guess postdoc fellowship. But that part out, you were sort of doing both. You were doing both jobs.
Yeah, when I was doing the postdoc, I got my PhD in 2004 and I got the postdoc immediately after. So I started, I think, end of 2004, beginning of 2005 with the postdoc. And I started managing The Gossip also at the beginning of 2005. So those 2 things happened at once. So I had like 1 year of my postdoc where we were just ramping up the band and sort of working on it. But I had lived in England when I was in college, and I really felt like I had a feel for the English market, and I had a feeling that The Gossip would do really well there. So I worked with a label in the tiny little dance label that had never put out a full length, and they signed The Gossip. We put out their record, and then we took that record to radio 4 different times. Wow. The English market is different than the American market in a lot of ways. You can resurface the same single multiple times. And the funny part was the single wasn't gaining traction at radio, although everybody loved the band. Like the band was super popular live and everybody who met them loved them. But they weren't getting whatever the traction was at radio that they wanted. And then in like February of 2007, this crazy thing happened where the band was extremely popular with other bands, which is sort of one way into the industry for some artists. I'm sure you know that from artists on your roster. It's like artists can either have like tons of fans who are regular people, or they can have tons of fans who are musicians. And I feel like both ways like are legitimate. Like if you have an artist that has one of those 2 things, like they're legitimately going to be successful, because other artists are often like the way in for artists. Anyway, so they had tons of fans. So like one of their fans was one of the guys from Oasis. So we got invited to this party on the night of like the Brit Awards or something. And we were waiting outside the club where Oasis's after party was happening, like Noel Gallagher's after party. And we're literally standing on the street in this London, just like cul-de-sac. And all of the paparazzi are lined up across the street and they're all waiting for famous people to show up. And we're just standing there and they're ignoring us completely. And Beth would like walk across the road and talk to them. And they were completely uninterested, right? So then we went home to America. And 10 days later, we had to be back in England for some kind of an appearance or some kind of something. And during that 10 days is when they switched how the charts were calculated to include downloads for the first time. And all of a sudden, when we came back 10 days later, we had a number 7 single on the charts. And literally were chased down the street by those same paparazzi. Like it was surreal. It was so surreal. So that was a crazy experience.
So I guess, and again, I still actually have plans to go back a second, but while we're on the gossip and this period, I'm also, I guess, just curious. So the gossip are on Kill Rock Stars. You're running Kill Rock Stars and managing them, and you actually move them, I guess, from your label. Is that right? And I guess, what was the thought process behind that? I'm just very curious as someone, running a label.
So I started managing the gossip in 2005, and we recorded the album Standing in the Way of Control in like April of 2005. And then Slim, who was running the label, said that he didn't want to release the album. He thought the album was really great. And so he didn't want to release it till it had a really good shot, because in those days, Slim was releasing a lot of albums. And so I think he had like 30 albums that were coming out in 2005, and he didn't want it to get buried somewhere and not get the attention paid to it that it normally would. Also, these were the days, all of a sudden I have a frog, sorry. These were the days when the month you released an album, it actually mattered. It had, because of retail shelf space, because of the press, like there were actual reasons for. Nowadays it's all bets are off. You can release an album and, whenever you want. But so he wanted to wait till January of 2006 to release the record. So all of 2005, I was working with the band to sort of build their profile in the UK. And we had this deal with this label that was going to release the album in the beginning of 2006. So Kill Rock Stars released it. This label released it in the UK. And then at the beginning of 2006, that's when we started really like pushing the album hard in the UK. So we were flying to the UK like once a month at least. And then it was like the summer of 2006 that Slim said, "Hey, I want to take this job at a major label. I want to go to New York. Will you take the label over?" So I didn't actually agree to that and start running the label till like October of 2006, when the whole gossip campaign had already been being pushed the whole time. And by that time, I'm pretty sure by that time we were already talking to other labels, because despite the fact that it didn't hit the radio till early 2007, I mean, they made a huge splash in the UK. As anyone who's spending time in the UK or was there at that time knows, like they were very exciting. And so we'd already gotten tons of label interest. So I was already negotiating with Sony by the time that I actually became the head of their label. So it wasn't like there was necessarily a conflict of interest. It was more like we knew that they were already heading out. And that's what ended up happening. I'm pretty sure we signed the deal with Sony in like September, or no, I think it was like November of 06. So it was like they were really not on my label anymore.
Well, no, it seems more like a reverse conflict of interest than a conflict of interest. It seems like you would have wanted to try to actually
keep them. I know.
So that's why I was curious, but that makes a lot of sense. It seems like you were winding down.
Well, yeah, I didn't know. I mean, who knew what was going to happen with Kill Rock Stars?
Yeah.
What?
Which I do want to get to, but now let's go back again to when you were a little younger. So your first music stuff, from the 14-year-old playing bass to Grinnell to the Minneapolis band, all that is rooted very much in like the underground and in punk, and sort of operating outside of the system. Where do you think you got that idea from? Where do you think you got those values? Like, when was the first? At what point were you like, I want to do this other thing, right? Because especially before the internet, you had to kind of seek that out. Usually, it wasn't like just a choice. Do I want to go this way or this way? You had to kind of find that, or maybe it found you.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question, Joe. I mean, where do any of us come at this? Like, I've always had a very like weird philosophy of like I never wanted to be normal, right? I was always like, ew, normal. But at the same time, I was also like, I don't want to be so trying too hard in the other direction that I'm like one of the goofy people at the goofy table, the ones who wear the cat in the hat hats and capes and shit. Like, I was very clear, like, I don't want to be them, but I also sure as hell don't want to be them, like over there at the like popular kid table with, sports team things, badges and t-shirts and stuff. Like I had a pretty clear vision. And I feel like in the 80s, it was really possible because there was a whole underground of music that was accessible. Like we had alternative radio that was actually alternative. I don't know what has happened to the term. I'm sorry about the screaming children. It's just part of my house at this time. The alternative radio was actually alternative radio. It wasn't just some other version of Top 40. And so I feel like there was a path to that kind of a thought process. You know, I did the whole wearing black, listening to the Smiths, you know, and the funny thing is that later I guess that was kind of goth, but I also didn't want to like dress like Susie and the Banshees. Like I didn't want to look like that, but I was willing to like wear black and just listen to my music and be my own person. But I kind of have always done that. Like I've always been willing to not be part of a crowd and be my own, whatever my own thing is. So I don't know why that is, but that's just, I was willing to do that. You know, I didn't need to be in a gang of people who were wearing black. But I was gonna, you know, it's like my favorite artist in 1985 was Robin Hitchcock. And he's still one of my all-time favorite artists. And I think it's amazing that he lives in East Nashville and I live in Green Hills. Like, and I know him, I have his email, like we talk now, like it. So that's like probably the greatest achievement of my music career is that I'm like now friends with Robin Hitchcock, which is bananas. But you know what I mean? It's like some people who listen to the Smiths and the Cure wouldn't be allowed to also like Robin Hitchcock. You know what I mean? And I was just like, I don't give a shit about that. I'm not, you can't put me in that box. I don't know. It's just who I am.
So when you were starting bands, I guess maybe Shepherd Kings, but probably really Hissyfits was the one that you started trying to do more with just because it didn't break up. Was your goal just to get like bigger and bigger and signed to Sony and signed to Columbia the way it kind of became later? Or was your original goal to kind of be a really big underground band?
Oh yeah. See, I mean, in those days, I feel like the biggest thing you could imagine being on was like Merge, right? I mean, to be on Merge would have been like the pipe dream of all dreams, right? Or Kill Rock Stars. Actually, the funny part is Kill Rock Stars was probably the label that I most wanted to be on because there were like Slater. I was a huge Slater-Kinney fan in the 90s. So like that, and it's funny because I actually remember having a conversation with my boyfriend before I met Slim, before I had anything to do with that. I was reading the liner notes of a Slater-Kinney record and it thanked Slim Moon. And I was like, Slim Moon, what a weird name. And I remember that conversation distinctly because now I've actually been married to the guy for 20 years. So it's just funny to think I remember having that conversation. But yeah, like, so Kill Rock Stars was like a huge, that was the pinnacle. Like I never aspired to be on a major label of any sort with my music. I just didn't think that was a thing. I didn't think that was, and it was really different too, because in the 80s and 90s, you know, major labels were putting out hair metal and ballads and pop and stuff. You know, it didn't feel like there was any kind of a home for alternative music. Now things have changed a lot. So I feel like that's very different now. But
what do you think has changed? Do you think the alternative has got more mainstream, or do you think the mainstream has got more alternative?
I think everybody's chasing the same thing, which is how to make a living at this point. And I think as it's, you know, independent labels have had so much success in the last 20 years that, or 20 or 30 years really, that I think the majors couldn't help but notice that. And I think so their philosophy of the types of artists that they can sign has changed with that. I mean, I don't know that I would have ever thought there could be a Billie Eilish on a major. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
25 or 30 years ago. But now there is. So I'm just saying, I think it's been, the music industry has gotten so much more difficult in terms of the economics of it, that it's every label at every level has so much trouble making money because the income streams have changed, that I think everybody's just doing the best that they can. And I think it's much less about indie versus major than it once may have been. I think it's more about, like, if anything, labels versus tech companies, you know?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that now, or should we continue on your bio a little bit? We're only at the Kill Rock Stars era. Do you want to talk?
I know. I'm like, God, that is going to take, how long do we have? This is really
I know. Sorry. We don't have 2 hours.
Let's plow through the bio.
Let's get through. So So in 2006 is when you started sort of helming Kill Rock Stars fully, I think, right?
Yeah.
And then
End
you
of
did that
2006.
until just last year.
Yeah.
What was that transition like? Was that hard to move out of, I just associated that so much, like myself, like this is like who you are, what you do. Was it weird sort of leaving that? I guess it's still like in the household in some ways, but was it weird like leaving that
just
behind?
In the basement.
Yeah.
No, actually for me, it was the right time, because I think I was done after 13 years of running a label. I think I was done with that. I feel like I had started to get bored. And that's not a good reflection on me necessarily, because there are other ways that I could have challenged myself, if I had really had the passion to stick with it. But I think I'd just gotten, I presided over a transition in the music industry that was very difficult. So when I took over in 2006, it was still a completely physical market with downloads. And now it's a streaming market. And the change in the economics from then to now was the kind of soul killing and crushing thing that it's hard, I think, to get through without being a different kind of person, without being someone who's really excited by innovation and what's next. And I think for the people who have started labels since, like, let's say 2011 or 2012, when streaming really started churning, I completely understand why they're fine, but I feel like I'm a weird dinosaur type that, like, because I came in when it was a physical marketplace, and because I had a notion of how to market artists successfully in that marketplace, I didn't have the best luck transitioning to the streaming world, just personally, because it's too depressing to me that an artist that I know is wonderful, that I know that, in 2007 could have sold 20 or 30,000 copies of their record, is now getting no traction and nothing in the streaming world. Like, that became so depressing for me that I think it's really good that I moved when I did, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess, what do you think about, I guess, trying to think of the right way to put this, streaming's impact in general, as far as, has it been, we're here now. It's not like, where is this going right now? We are currently in the streaming era, and we have been for at least a year or two fully in, and we've been kind of headed there for quite a while. And I understand why you feel like personally it was a little bit overwhelming, exhausting, seeing all the different eras. But do you think, just as both a consumer and as a label operating in this era, is this a good or a bad era? Was it a net positive or a net negative kind of change overall, thinking about all the different ways it impacts things? I think there's a lot of pros and cons, but the question is, like, I guess I'm wondering what your thoughts are. This is just net negative, net positive.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I also am not the kind of person who's like, back in my day, it was better, blah, blah, blah. It isn't. It's just different. It wasn't better. It's just different. The barriers to access are largely removed in the streaming age, but at the same time, putting a record out in the streaming age is like dropping a rock into the ocean, right? And you might get a couple of ripples, but then it's gone and you can't find it again. So, like, that's the downside. The upside is, when something takes off, it takes off way faster and way more explosively than it ever could in the past. So, I mean, I think there's pros and cons. I don't think I can say it's a net positive or a net negative. I think the things that are negative are not just negative for the music industry. I think they're negative for our culture across the board. Like, I think we really have to revisit the notion of the value of copyright. That is, if we continue to let that erode, we're going to be in serious trouble. Not that we're not in serious trouble at this moment in October 2020. Like, I think we're in pretty big trouble right now anyway. But, that's a conversation that needs to come to the forefront. So I just think we're in a really different time, and it is what it is. And people are just going to have to you know, some people are doing great and some people are not doing great. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a net negative or net positive. Sorry.
No, it's certainly just thinking. I was thinking while you're talking about the dropping a rock in the ocean, right? It's certainly a really consolidated era. Like we've never seen this kind of consolidation. The industry was awful in a lot of ways, as you know, for all time. There's always been a lot of bad parts of the industry. There's always been a lot of sort of consolidation at the top, like a big five, you know, a big three. But it feels like you said now it's not about labels, it's about tech companies, and it's consolidated into almost like two to three places. And I think just thinking about that analogy you made, I think you're right, but it is like can be like dropping a rock in the ocean, but you didn't used to have to drop it in the ocean, right? You used to be able to drop your rock in like a pond. And then there was this other ocean out there. And I feel like now your only choice is to put it into one of these 2 or 3 mega platforms with all music on one. And that's a huge difference. Like I think that type of consolidation has never really been seen before. And I'm curious. I guess I have personal worries about what impact that's going to have, sort of culturally, on who makes a splash, to continue this analogy. But I'm wondering if you think there's any hope to get out of to break some of that up in some ways, or if we're just in an era of just mega consolidation moving forward.
Well, I mean, that's what we have to choose as a country. Like, I feel like as a country, we have to figure out what kind of consolidation is too much. I feel like the definition of antitrust has really changed, and probably in a bad way over the last 20 years or so. I think protecting the consumer is great, but I also think we need to protect the industry. So I think we might need to revisit that. But one thing I was going to say is, it's not all bad in certain ways, because in the beginning of the streaming era, it appeared that labels were going to become super irrelevant. And that was really the conversation at the time was, who needs a label? Because you can just release your own music and be just as successful, which BET Dubs has not happened or it's happened on like a super small scale, which is just a testament to the fact that the music business is a business. It is a complicated industry. There is a lot of knowledge to be had. I feel like that's just sort of an ignorant statement that people make, like, oh, you don't need a label. It's like, if you say that, that's because you don't know what a label does. And the only answer to that is, sure, you don't need a label per se, but you need a team of people who are going to do everything that a label would have done for you. So it's an irrelevant, it's a dumb statement. But what is happening now is, because of the ocean-like nature of streaming, I think labels are actually becoming more relevant in the last 18 months. I think we've seen a real resurgence in label relevance for the simple reason that people require curation, right? There's just literally too much stuff to listen to. And a lot of times that curation is happening in ways that aren't necessarily labels, but the labels are going to benefit from that same thing. I mean, we just did a event last week on podcasting. We did a podcasting summit. Actually, that might've been Tuesday. That might've been this week. Oh my God. Yeah, it was this week. And we were talking about the fact that podcasts have now started to create their own little, instead of looking up a podcast by genre per se, they sort of, you get like podcasting neighborhoods, which I think is a great way of saying it. So it's like, if you like podcasts that are sort of like this podcast, this is the family of podcasts that you might be interested in. So it's like a podcast neighborhood rather than specifically a genre. And I think that that's critical, right? Because there's just too much stuff out there for people to truly find. Discovery was touted as this big thing in the beginning of streaming. And honestly, Discover Weekly, and all of these features, these playlists have been great for discovery, but you still need help. You can't do it yourself. It's like when I was a kid, I love to think about the statistics. So when I came of age, when I started listening to music in, let's say 1981, okay, we were 15 years from the Beatles, right? The rock revolution, right? So there was literally 15 years worth of music that I had missed out on. So if I really was dedicated when I was, 1981, 82, 83, which I was, I could probably have listened to everything that was put out in the last 15 years, plus the year that I was born. I mean, that I lived in. Can you imagine trying to listen to all the music that was even put out in 1 year or like a month recently? I mean, it's impossible. You can't actually do it. Like no human could do it. So we've just completely changed where we're at. Sorry, I sort of went on a tangent.
No, that's the whole point of this. No, I think about that a lot too, though, how impossible it would be to actually, you can't, nobody can, which also means journalists can't, right? It means certainly editors of playlists can't, right? Mm-hmm. And yet that's, I think, the problem with the consolidation. The more you put things in one place, knowing it's impossible to actually really go through it all, I think we do need some type of dispersal, whatever. I don't know what the opposite of consolidation really is, a breakup, and to have many different, I guess competition is the opposite of consolidation, right? I think there needs to be more competition, which seems like it's getting more difficult, right? As far as a barrier to entry in the new industry, it seems like it has to be a tech company.
It is, yeah, but you're right. It's probably going to be a tech company because that's the thing. It's like the tech changes constantly. I mean, we're constantly seeing new companies pop up that have the new platforms that the kids want to use, I mean, Twitch, TikTok, those are just the most recent. But then, the problem with the music industry is that we've always sort of had to play catch up to technology, and we're not super good at it. But that said, that is our task, right? And the main reason that that's our task is because music is like the amount of bits or bytes or whatever it is that it takes up. The number of ones and zeros in a music file is very small. So it's easily moved around. And, that's just our lot in life. We're stuck with that. If we want to make these small bits of information have continued value, we have to hang on to them and keep an eye on them and make sure we're monetizing them properly. I mean, that's the big task for the music industry right now is how do we properly monetize, music and in a way that's going to keep artists and songwriters in business. Because honestly, at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, and that's where so much is, I think, going to have to come down to regulation, right? Because a lot of the stuff is being monetized, but by other people that aren't the actual, our content, like the music industry's content is being well monetized by everybody but the music industry, and it's out of their control, right? It's because a lot of the laws were written in 1998 before people used the internet, right? The copyright laws related to music on the internet were literally written before Facebook existed, before Twitter existed, before I think when I looked it up, it was 25% of Americans even had the internet at home when that law was written. And we all know why it's not being updated because of all companies making fortunes off of content that is not theirs. And I feel like that's the biggest challenge. That's getting to what you do now. That's what makes advocacy groups and trade groups like Music Biz, like Merlin, going to be the most important players, hopefully only in the short term. But I think in the short term, until we can get some power back and the laws back, it's going to take industry-wide pushes of regulation, right? I just don't see another way out of this. Do you? I just see it with the laws the way they are. Music is always just going to be given away for free by companies making money off of others, whether it's selling shares of their stock, whether it's selling ads on the music that they're sort of giving away for free, or it's anything in between. And there's no reason for them not to do that because the laws permit them to, at least in America.
Well, don't underestimate the power of public opinion, because I will say, that more tech companies are coming to the table when they first start now than did easily 10 or 15 years ago, because they don't want the public outcry. I mean, the passage of the MMA in 2018 was really important for many reasons, one of which was, it showed the ability of the music industry to come together and work together on a project and get it done. But another reason was because Spotify was genuinely tired of getting sued, right? They were tired of getting sued to pay publishing royalties that they hadn't gotten proper licenses for. And they came to the table too. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of room for our industry to work together to make the future better. And I'm actually seeing more of that than we used to see. And I think it has to do with the court of public opinion. I mean, we see it in all the time in issues that, that the public doesn't understand. And it's like people like you and me who've run record labels, when Taylor Swift goes out into the public and says, I should own my own masters. And everybody, all of her zillions of fans are like, yeah, artists should own their own masters. And it's like, okay, guys, maybe they should, but that's complicated. Like, that's a complicated issue. She didn't put up her own $17 million in the beginning of her career to help her get where she is. So what do those people get? I mean, in other words, these are always complicated issues, but I think companies do respond to external pressure. And I think when artists are vocal and when their fans are vocal, it creates an environment where tech companies are a little bit more careful about when, wanting to come to the table and actually do things right. Because there are laws in place. I mean, we may not like the royalty rates, but there are royalty rates for almost everything at this point. We're starting to, we need help in the area of live streaming, because that's a new thing that's really it's not a new thing, but it's a thing that's really popped up recently. And we really need help in the podcasting arena, because it still seems like the Wild West for licensing. But that said, other things have been successful in getting licenses put in place. Now we have the MMA that's going to really help the songwriters. So, I feel like it's not hopeless by any stretch. It's really more a case of how do we continue to work together? And the thing about Music Biz that I like, my organization, is that we're a trade association for everybody. So we have the copyright holders, but we also have the tech companies. And I think that's important for these folks to have a place to meet and talk, because the people who are actually working at these companies are awesome music business people. Like, they are true music lovers. And I think ultimately everyone that I know has the interests of artists at heart. I know some people will call me a Pollyanna and say like, oh, that's, not true. But, I don't think people get into the music business. I mean, you can get into a lot of businesses to make money. But the vast majority of people in the music industry, I think, are here because they love music and because they love artists who make music. And I think, that's where we really need to, if in my opinion, what we actually need in this country to make significant change is a strong artists organization. An organization where artists, like, for example, they have an organization in the UK for artists that's actually pretty powerful. But this in our country, for some reason, we just don't have that. And I feel like that's sort of our next step as an industry, is to try to help artists form a coalition that truly has teeth. Because I think if the artists demand stuff, then everyone's going to listen.
That's right. Yeah. And I don't want you to think I was saying it was hopeless. I mean, something like the MMA is exactly what I was saying. It was hopeless to do it without a large advocacy group. Like, I think things like MMA, which are really important. And one of the first things I've seen, in my lifetime that felt like a move in the right direction at a government level in the industry, could not have been accomplished by like a record label. It had to be a large body of record labels. And I guess that's what I mean, is why you need these organizations. Like a label like Kill Rock Stars in 2006, which was highly successful, as you know, wouldn't have needed to worry about a lot of the government regulation of the industry. And I think a label of equal success now does need to worry about government regulation of the industry. And so the only thing you can do about that is joining, something like a Merlin, right? Or one of these advocacy groups or trade organizations. And I think that is a that's just something that interesting. So that's what I meant by hopeless. It's hopeless to just kind of do your own thing and shut out the rest of the world the way you used to be able to. You can't do that anymore. You have to be in a large body. But I think that makes joining these things more important. That's probably why you're seeing more labels join that didn't used to be members, if I had to guess.
Yeah. No, I think that what you're saying is totally true. I mean, I've been sort of on this bandwagon for, 15 years that we're stronger together and we're all in it together. And, as every year progresses, I feel like we see that more and more, that everybody's starting to understand that, because especially the independent labels. I mean, the independent labels have always been like, I'm independent, man. I'm over here. I'm doing my own thing. And it's like, that's great. That used to work, but it's not working so well right now. The world has changed, and everybody sort of has to get with the program. And, maybe you think I'm being too kumbaya, but at the same time, I think it's like, no, we got to do this.
Yeah. And I guess I'm also interested in you saying you think that the labels are winning the public relations battle, or the court of public opinion, I guess. Cause I felt like the industry's losing. I feel like every time we go up against stronger regulation, you get up against these like censorship, you got to get, and these are all funded by Google and by the Facebook and by the companies trying to actually keep the laws in the 1998 world. But what you see is these quote unquote like grassroots efforts to turn the argument to censorship, and they're going to take the memes away, and they're going to, things like that. And I feel like actually the industry usually loses the court of public opinion. So it's interesting to hear you say that you're doing well.
I don't think that's what I meant. I think what I meant is because the court of public opinion is really vocal and immediate now. I mean, people tweet things in seconds instead of, waiting for a news article to happen. I think what I'm saying is because of that, the new tech companies that are coming into the marketplace are more cautious and think twice about just going ahead and not licensing music properly, because they know if they do that, they're going to get in huge trouble. I mean, you just saw that Twitch has now just announced that they're doing licensing deals for their music. And I think that the reason for that is because they were getting too much flack in the court of public opinion. I definitely didn't say that the labels are on the good, are getting good PR. I think the music industry, one of our biggest problems, honestly, is that we just always lose the PR battle. Like somehow there's a narrative out there. I mean, I'm an anthropologist, so I would say this is, culture gives you options and obligations. And one of our options in our culture in America is to always say this is the record label's fault, right? Record labels are the big bad guys. They're here to take away your money. They don't, blah, 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 blah. And it's like independent labels were always tarred with that exact same brush. It doesn't matter, in the court of public opinion, it didn't matter whether you're independent or major, you're the bad guy. And you're trying to screw over the artist. And the thing, so I'm definitely not saying that labels are winning some kind of PR battle, like no way. But I think that we all have to really, work together to get rid of that image. I think that that's a good goal for us, is to show that we're on the side of artists. Obviously, labels wouldn't have business if it wasn't artists. Like we wouldn't make any money at all. So artists are the central aspect of our business. Like they're the central relationships. I'm not a PR guru. I don't know how we're going to change the spin on that, but I do know that the more we work with artists and we work on behalf of artists to do the right thing in the industry, that's a good thing. I don't know whether it's going to change the PR campaign though.
I was hoping you had the answers to that one, but
all right.
So let's switch gears a little bit while we're talking about the current state of the industry. And I think one of the biggest things the industry has recognized about itself this year has to actually just do with sort of some social justice related topics. And I think, I don't know why it took 70 years or so, but for whatever reason this year, there seemed to have been a lot of acknowledgement within the industry itself, not just criticism of the industry from the outside, which has been going on for quite a while, but within the industry itself, an acknowledgement of, I guess, just how white the industry is, how male the industry is. And I'm just wondering, I guess, one, what your thoughts on are, like, why after so many years of criticism, this finally seemed to break through this year, and two, I guess, what you think as an industry leader, you can do and we can be doing about it. Other industry leaders can be doing about it. And I guess we're speaking to educators. So like what educators can, what we can actually do, practically actionable things.
Well, I think, if you look at history, it's often hard to say why certain events were the watershed moments that they were. You can just say that they were. And, the murder of George Floyd was that moment for our culture, for us as a country. And I think what's great is that the music industry, stepped up, and a lot of people started, the show must be paused, was, I think, a very visible moment. It put the music industry in the spotlight. I also think the music industry is uniquely poised to do something about this injustice for the simple reason that, the whole industry is based on music made by Black people, by women, by marginalized groups, people of every sexual orientation and gender identity, and artists are the people who speak, who talk about how they feel and their experiences in the world. And so, because we're built on this foundation of love for that music, and we hope the people who make that music, I think we're in the perfect place to actually do something about it. Now, what do we do about it? I think everyone's figuring that out. Yesterday, the Recording Academy had a 4-hour summit called Change Music, which was great. It brought a lot of Black leaders and executives in the industry and outside of the industry to speak on the topic. And I thought it was very powerful and had a lot of good ideas. Music Biz is doing a summit called Driving Change in October, later this month, the 20th through the 22nd, where we're doing the same thing. We're bringing together a lot of voices across the industry and a lot of different groups that are, activist groups. We have GLAAD speaking, She Is the Music, the Black Music Action Coalition. I think now is the time for us to brainstorm. I think now is the time for us to listen. And I think now is the time for us to create a list of those actionable items. If you go to the hashtag theshowmustbepaused.com, I think it's theshowmustbepaused.com, they put up last month a list of actionable items and demands for the industry, like things that industry could actually do. And I think, we need to take these things seriously. We also need to keep this moment alive. There have been several significant actions taken in terms of HR stuff, where a lot of companies have appointed a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer to their staffs. And I think to me, it's like we have to do the things that we know that we have to do that we've been letting ourselves slide on in the past, which is, hire more people of color, promote more people of color, don't settle for an industry where everybody at the top is a white guy, continue to push back. In my own life, I feel like what I've really taken away from this summer is that it's the easiest way that privilege works is to be the unmarked category. If you want to talk linguistics, so Black is the marked category, but whiteness is the unmarked category, which means we get to just go about our daily lives and do things and not be, it's like, I'm not worried when a cop pulls me over because I'm the unmarked category. I'm not going to get in trouble. I'm not going to get murdered for running a stop sign. But what is interesting is, I started having conversations this summer and I started looking around and realizing the vast majority of people that I know in the industry are white. And, you could say that just happened. That's just an accident. But the truth is people are most comfortable with people who look like them in most cases. And even if that's not the case and you love everybody, you feel exactly the same about everybody. you do get to a point where you know who you know, and you don't push it. And so one thing I've found this summer for myself is just push it. Like, go out of your way to make different friends and expand your circle. Really make the effort to expand your circle and bring in different people, because it's only going to make your life better and everybody else's life better. And I mean, honestly, from the minute I got to music biz, the first thing I set about doing was changing up the board to try to make it more diverse and inclusive. And that's just been a fantastic, nothing but good has come of that. It's been the board makeup is fantastic, and we're not there yet. We don't have gender parity. We don't have racial parity, but we're working on it, and we're working on it in a meaningful way that's actually reflecting in what we do. So, it's a hard road for all of us, but I think we need to do it and not let ourselves off the hook. Don't give yourself the excuse of, oh, well, I don't have to do this because that would make me uncomfortable.
No, I mean, that's a great answer. And I'm glad that people like you at the top are thinking about it. It's great to hear that. And I think I'm excited to see where things go in the next couple of years. And like you said, I hope that the momentum does not die and in fact picks up, because I think there's a lot of work that has to be done in the music industry. And I think way more than we can talk about right now. But I hope to see real radical change, and not just talk. I'm not exactly optimistic, but I'm not fully pessimistic, that we'll see sort of meaningful radical change in this industry.
Well, I think, my husband has done a lot of work in social justice because he was trained to be a minister in the middle of when he wasn't doing management, and before he came back to the label, that's sort of where he went. And he said, one of the most important things is listening. For white people to do is listen. And when I was listening to the Change Music event yesterday, I heard a lot of the Black people on that summit say that this moment feels different to them because the white people they know are really upset, and that they haven't seen that before. And I think that that's really, to me, that makes it feel different, this moment in history, for whatever reason. I feel like that's where we are, and I think that's great. And so we as white people, we need to stay angry and keep listening and keep supporting, because we also can't throw it back on Black people and make them do this all themselves. Like, that's impossible. We have to be good allies, and we have to help and do the heavy lifting as well. Whatever that may look like.
Yeah, I mean, and that's great advice, and the listening is great advice. I worry that when people listen, they're not going to like what they hear. I've seen that a lot too. Like, they bring someone in, they say, "What do you want?" Oh, that's we can't do that. And I worry that that's what the industry, because the industry needs radical, like large sweeping change, not like hire one person or put out a statement. And I worry. But I'm excited to see what unfolds. We are getting near the end of our talk, and I want to make sure we have time to talk about what is going on at Music Biz right now, and especially talking to educators, how they can either be involved, like what do you have coming up. Let's make sure we have some time for that.
Right. Well, as most people here probably know, we have an academic partnership program with schools. We have 27 academic partners. It's a very low cost. I think it's $500 to be an academic partner. And your students get a lot of benefits. Right now, what that means is reduced rates to our events. And we have done 26 events so far. And I think we have 6 more coming up this year alone. And obviously with COVID as it is, we'll be doing many more of these online events into the future. One of our most successful was our Next Gen U program, which probably a lot of people watching either had students who attended or watched or knew about. And we're going to be doing that. That'll be something we're going to be doing regularly, because I think that was really useful for students. It's basically our student summit where we talk, to music business students about how they can, it was across the board. It was about your resume. It was about best practices for networking. It was about self-care, and we're going to do plenty more of those. We also have a scholarship fund, which since I came on board, I have an education committee now that's working to pump up that scholarship fund. But we usually give out, I can't remember how many awards, 20 something awards per year. And it's not a ton of money, but it's a nice chunk. It'll buy your books and probably a couple of courses. But it's a great thing. So academic partners, students get to apply for the scholarship fund, for money from the scholarship fund. We're going to be doing an online job fair for students. So we have a lot of stuff lined up for the future for students. We also have a lot of stuff lined up for other folks in other parts of the industry. So just, get on our mailing list. We'll send you an email, tell you everything that's coming up. Driving Change is October 20th through 22nd, but next week is our Onward and Upward event, which is 4 keynotes, which I'll be doing the interviews each day with 4 executives. And then in the morning on those 4 days next week, Monday through Thursday, we have workshops by Amazon, Spotify, TikTok, Bandcamp, Pandora, Sirius, XM, SoundCloud, I think. And those are great because those are like those best practices workshops that we normally have at the big annual convention. It's useful for people who want to sort of maximize, how they're using those platforms. So that's what's coming up, and stay tuned because there's going to be a lot more stuff.
Yeah, and where can they go for more information and all that? I guess there's a website somewhere.
Musicbiz.org.
Musicbiz.org. I really want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. I feel like I could do this for another 2 hours. I wish maybe we'll have to schedule a part 2 sometime. Maybe we can bring you to Drexel. I'd love to do that.
Oh, thanks.
And we can talk for longer. It's always a pleasure. Again, I feel like there was like a million more things I wanted to talk about with you. But
next time, part 2, for sure.
Part two coming up. But thank you again. This was really, really great. And musicbiz.org for more information and all that stuff.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me, you guys. It was fun.
Bye, everybody.